Deviance is a term and a topic of study in sociology that can often be misunderstood. You see, deviance is any behavior, physical appearance, or attitude that is socially challenged and or condemned because it departs from the norms and expectations of some group. Deviance is always defined according to the norms. You see, I say in the notes there that when you think about deviance, think about norms. For some, I think there's a tendency to think about deviance and think about crime. Uh, they, individuals hear that term deviance and they think of breaking the law, rule breaking. And yes, there is some overlap between deviance and criminal behavior. But not all crime is deviance, and not all deviant behavior is going to be crime. For instance, I can, as the instructor of this course, suppose I were to show up in the classroom uh, and pick my nose as I am delivering a lecture. Well, that would be deviant because it's not, a standard or typical behavior, for someone who is instructing a class, but it would not be a criminal behavior. I would not be breaking any laws. I would not be breaking any rules. Similarly, I can attend a very formal gathering and use profanity. People might give me dirty looks. I might stand out. I might, be a topic of conversation in a negative way for people who are, attending with me. But, using profanity, even in a formal setting like that, it's not, a criminal offense. And then there are some criminal offenses that might not be deviant. If I am on the road driving 85 miles an hour and with a speed limit of, say, 55, well, I'm going 30 miles over the speed limit for sure. I'm breaking the rules of the road, but I might be driving within the flow of traffic. Other drivers might be driving at a similar speed as I am. Similarly, something that is going to be a crime but not necessarily deviant. Suppose I am selling items at, say, an outdoor flea market. Well, I'm supposed to have a permit for that. I don't have a permit for that. I'm selling things without a permit. That is a crime. But if this is some outdoor, market, well, there are surely going to be other people selling goods who probably don't have permits as well. So, selling things without a permit, in some instances, it's not deviant. In some places, it might be very commonplace. So, yes, there is sometimes some overlap between deviance and crime, but not all deviance is crime, and not all crime is deviance. When we think about deviance, we have to be thinking about norms. If something is deviant, it's going against the norms. It's challenging the norms. Norms are determined by the social context. What is considered normal, our normal attitudes, our normal behaviors, those are going to be dependent upon the context. Context can mean, time and place, or setting is a term that is also synonymous with context. You see three images here in the upper left. That is a work of art titled The Community of Saints. So in a context like that, among very religious people, people who take their exercise of religion very seriously, there are certain things that we would expect to be deviant there. Certainly, wearing, very revealing clothes, showing a lot of skin, maybe having a lot of tattoos would also be a deviant appearance. There'd be an appearance that goes against the norms of that group. If I'm using a lot of profanity, speaking about topics that are very sexual in nature, yeah, within that context, among that group of people, among the community of saints there, yes, that would be deviant. But then if you look at the upper right, you see an image of the French Quarter in New Orleans. Well, what is deviant in the community of saints might not at all be deviant in the French Quarter of New Orleans. If you have people wearing revealing clothes, showing a lot of skin, people with tattoos, uh, people using profanity, well, you'll see and hear all of that on the French Quarter of New Orleans. You will see people who are intoxicated, people who have had too much to drink or consumed drugs, that's going to be very deviant in the community of saints. But again, it's quite commonplace to see that in the French Quarter of New Orleans, especially as you get later into the evening, and especially during Mardi Gras. Down at the bottom there, you see an image from a country club. It looks as though they're having some type of lunch or maybe brunch in a country club. Well, what would be deviant there? Let's take a look at the back. You've got food being served. You've got a spread, as they say, with food that individuals can pick up and take back to their table. Well, if I were to walk into that dining area with, say, pizza boxes from Little Caesars or Papa John's, or maybe I've got food from Burger King or Popeyes, I'd probably get some bizarre looks. Like, what are you doing here? You got the chef here at the country club who's prepared this, meal for us, this lunch, this brunch. Why are you bringing in food from outside of the country club? It's not necessary. It's deviant because it would go against the norms of that group, that time, that place, that setting. It's deviant because it challenges the norms or goes against the norms of that particular group. So what is deviant, what gets considered deviant, is always going to be related to where we are, what time it is, who we're with. It's all about context, time, place, setting. Deviance is always going to be related to the context. Deviance is prevented or discouraged by what we call social control. Social control refers to all the various mechanisms that give people a reason to conform, give people a reason to not be deviant. To conform is the opposite of being deviant. If I am deviant, I'm violating or challenging norms. If I'm conforming, I'm following along with those norms. Social control refers to all the mechanisms that give someone what we call a stake in conformity, or give people stakes in conformity. Another word for stakes is going to be incentives, reasons. Our mechanisms of social control give us all reasons to conform. Let's talk about some of these mechanisms. For one, the orders of authority, or we could say the commands of authority. By authority, we just mean authority figures, the things that authority figures tell us to do. This could be our parents, this could be our boss or our supervisor, this could be a police officer, it could be a judge, it could be a probation officer, a social worker, so on and so forth. We might do what these individuals say because we don't want to be punished. They're in a position of authority over us that we don't want to attract bad attention from them. We certainly don't want to be punished. So we follow along because we don't want to violate the orders of authority. I mentioned we don't want to be punished. Well, punishments are another mechanism of social control. Sometimes we call punishments sanctions. Now, we can distinguish between formal sanctions and informal sanctions. Formal sanctions are those that are backed by recognized authority figures. So this, in a workplace, this would be our boss or our supervisor. It could be, the human resources department. It could be a judge, a probation officer, a teacher, a principal. If I am punished via formal sanctions, someone in a position of authority has levied some type of punishment. I'm suspended from school. I'm suspended from my workplace. I'm sentenced to probation and community service in court. I'm sentenced to prison time, or I have to pay fines. Those are all formal sanctions. Informal sanctions, well, these come about not from what authority figures decree, but they come about via interactions with our peers, interactions with our significant others. Informal sanctions hurt because of the effect they have on our reputation. Think about the offense of drunk driving or driving while intoxicated. We can think about both the formal and informal sanctions of operating a vehicle while drunk. Formal sanctions are likely to include a suspension of a driver's license. There might be some interlocking device that we have to use, or we have to like pass a breathalyzer in order for us to be able to start the car. The car will not start if alcohol is detected. It might be via our breath. It might be done via skin. There's different technology available for that. But we might have to use a device like that if we're going to drive. We might be sentenced to some jail time or even prison time, especially if we have previous offenses. Might be sentenced to undergo some alcohol counseling or driver safety school. All of those are, possible formal sanctions as well as fines. So those are all formal sanctions that we could incur as a result of drunk driving. Informal sanctions, well, these are going to be the things that really affect our reputation. Informal sanctions could be, well, our friends no longer view us as trustworthy. They see us as irresponsible. Our friends come to think that we have a drinking problem. They don't want to be in the car with us anymore. Those are informal sanctions. People will conform. People will not try to be deviant because they fear both the formal and informal sanctions. Censorship is another form of social control. We often think of censorship and we often hear of censorship in the context of entertainment. A certain song gets censored, a certain movie is censored. It's not going to be released to the general public. Censorship, as you see, is the suppression of speech or communicative capacities. My right to express myself is taken away. On social media, my account might be suspended. My ability to express myself has been taken away. People will avoid saying things that violate norms, avoid saying things that are hateful or hurtful because, yes, they don't want to be censored. Surveillance is another form of social control. Surveillance just means being watched. We certainly, we might hear surveillance and think of surveillance cameras, right? Because we're on camera, we don't do things that we're not supposed to be doing. Maybe in a workplace setting, maybe in an apartment or a townhouse community. But it's not just cameras. Sometimes it's just the threat of surveillance. We think we might be watched, so there's certain things that we don't do. Some of you have probably heard of a digital footprint. Well, that's a form of surveillance as well. People might lose their jobs or be subjected to certain penalties because of activities they've done that are made known through one's digital footprint. There's pictures posted or there's comments that are posted on a Facebook page or an Instagram page or TikTok, so on and so forth. So our digital footprint acts as a form of surveillance. Group pressure or groupthink is yet another mechanism of social control. Sometimes we don't challenge group norms, we don't challenge norms because we're a little afraid of what members of our peer group, members of our team, our club, we don't challenge them because of what they might say about us or what they might think about us. We might really disagree with something, but we keep it to ourselves because we don't want to incur the scrutiny and the criticism of members of our group. So group pressure, sometimes we call it groupthink, that also acts as a form of social control. And then lastly, there are other forms of social control. Having a job, being a student, being in a committed relationship, owning property. These all give us what we call a stake in conformity because they provide, again, incentives or reasons to not challenge norms. If I own my own car or I own my own house, and I have to pay for repairing it, that gives me a reason to take care of that car, that house. If I am in a committed relationship and I care about what my partner thinks about me, well, I'm probably not going to do things that my partner finds objectionable. If I have a job, I'm a student, that gives me reasons to follow along with norms because I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be put on academic suspension. I want to be able to graduate on time, so I don't want to be put on suspension. So all these statuses can also act as a form of social control, meaning that they give us reasons to follow along with norms.